Introduction: The Hidden Pope. In the pages of church history, where saints shine like stars and martyrs cry out in glory, there are figures wrapped in mystery, souls whose holiness was quiet, but no less powerful. One of them is Blessed Eugene III, a pope few remember, yet whose story is filled with courage, humility, and divine purpose. He did not rise through ambition or power, but was called from a life of silence to one of sacrifice. Born as Bernard Paganelli, he was a Cistercian monk shaped by the hands of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, a man of deep prayer and hidden strength. When the church was shaken by violence and division, the cardinals looked not to warriors or rulers, but to a monk with no crown, no army, and no desire for greatness. To his own sorrow, Bernard became Pope Eugene III. His reign would not be peaceful. He would face rebellion, exile, and the failure of a crusade. And yet, he remained faithful, not to the throne, but to Christ. He governed not with pride, but with a heart grounded in prayer. This is the story of a reluctant pope, a shepherd who carried the cross before the staff, a servant chosen to lead in a time of shadows. This is the journey of Blessed Eugene III. Chapter 1: The Monk and the Call. Long before the tiara touched his brow, he walked barefoot among the stones of silence. His name was Bernard Paganelli, and his heart was not drawn to power, but to peace. Born in Pisa, a city of towers and tides, Bernard grew up in a world of shifting powers and clashing voices. But something in him longed for stillness. He entered the church as a canon regular, devoting himself to prayer and the service of the altar. Yet the deeper he went, the more he yearned, not for titles, but for truth. That hunger led him far from his homeland. Northward he went, past cities and cathedrals, to the thick woods of Burgundy. There, in the quiet furnace of Clairvaux Abbey, a new kind of fire burned. The Cistercian order, founded on simplicity, poverty, and discipline, offered no comforts, but it did offer God. Under the fierce and brilliant Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, young Bernard Paganelli was tested. The days were long, the food sparse, the prayers relentless. But in that life stripped of luxury, he found the richness of divine presence. Years passed. Bernard became abbot of Tre Fontaine, a Cistercian monastery near Rome, surrounded by olive trees and silence. He lived as a servant, a teacher, a man hidden from the world's gaze. And then the call came. Rome was in chaos. Pope Lucius II had died in battle, struck by stones during a riot. The eternal city wept. The church needed a shepherd, but not just any man, a soul both brave and meek. The cardinals, desperate and divided, turned to the unlikeliest candidate, a quiet monk with no political allies, no taste for power, a man known only for holiness. Bernard resisted. He cried. He prayed. But the burden of Peter's throne was not something he could cast aside. God had spoken through the church. And so, with trembling hands, he obeyed. He took the name Eugene III. From the silence of the cloister, he stepped into a world of storms. He had no army, no wealth, no grand strategy, only faith. Thus began his pilgrimage, not as a monk, but as the vicar of Christ. The journey of the hidden pope had begun. Chapter 2: Exile and the Sword. The throne of St. Peter was no seat of comfort when Eugene III took it. Rome was restless. Its streets pulsed with rebellion, its people weary of papal rule, its nobles eager for control. And in the heart of this storm, the new pope stood alone. Only months after his election, Eugene was driven from the city. The very flock he had been chosen to shepherd rejected him. The Commune of Rome, a rising political movement, declared independence from papal authority. They wanted a republic, not a pope. The shepherd was cast out, and the wolves remained. But Eugene did not curse them. He did not call for vengeance. Instead, he turned to the tools of a monk: prayer, fasting, and quiet strength. From exile in Viterbo, then in Siena, and later in France, he wrote letters not of wrath, but of counsel. He pleaded not for revenge, but for the peace of Christ. Even while exiled from his own city, he continued to govern the church with patience and conviction. The world saw weakness, but heaven saw faith. And then came another storm, this time from beyond the sea. In 1145, shocking news arrived. The city of Edessa, one of the Christian strongholds in the east, had fallen to Muslim forces. Crusader blood had been spilled, and the Holy Land trembled. The hearts of the faithful cried out. Europe begged for a response. And so, from the ashes of loss, Eugene III took a bold step. He became the first pope in history to call a crusade. With quill and seal, he wrote the encyclical Quantum Predecessors, urging kings and peasants alike to take up the cross. It was not a cry for conquest, but a cry for defense, for the honor of Christ and the protection of pilgrims. And once again, he turned to his old teacher, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. The fiery monk preached the crusade across Europe, stirring hearts with sermons like thunder. Kings listened. Armies gathered. The Second Crusade was born, but it would not end in triumph. The expedition faltered, divided by pride and poor planning. Jerusalem remained under threat. The dream of victory faded into the dust. And yet Eugene did not despair. He had not placed his hope in swords, but in the will of God. While others measured success by power, he measured it by obedience. Even in failure, he remained faithful. He was still far from Rome, still a pope without a palace. But he had learned something deeper. Sometimes the truest victory is to endure. Chapter 3. Shepherd of Souls. Though far from the marble halls of the Lateran, Pope Eugene III never ceased to be a shepherd. His flocks stretched across kingdoms. Noblemen, peasants, monks, and mothers, all seeking the voice of the church, the presence of Christ in a time of chaos. He walked where few dared, not in armor, but in humility. Wherever he traveled, in exile or return, he brought with him the fragrance of prayer, the wisdom of silence. He was not a pope of spectacle, no grand feasts or jeweled thrones. His greatness was hidden, like seed beneath the soil. He listened more than he spoke. He blessed more than he ruled. To many, he seemed too soft, but to God he was strong. In a world where kings fought for land and bishops for influence, Eugene fought for souls. He issued decrees to defend the poor, protect monasteries, and reform the clergy. He summoned synods to guide the church with clarity and courage. And in his quiet wisdom, he became a source of strength for many. Even Saint Hildegard of Bingen, the visionary nun and prophetess, wrote to him, urging him to reform the church and rise with holy fire. Eugene did not silence her. He listened. He encouraged. He discerned the spirit. Slowly, painfully, he was able to return to Rome, though never in peace. At times welcomed, at times forced out again, his papacy was a rhythm of exile and return like breath. Yet with every step, he left behind not monuments, but mercy. He knew his reign would not bring glory, but he did not serve for praise. He served for love. And as the years wore on, his body weakened, but his soul burned brighter. He had known rejection, rebellion, and disappointment. But through it all, he never abandoned the path of Christ. He had become what few dared to be, a holy pope. A man who placed no trust in thrones or armies, but only in the cross. Chapter 4. The Hidden Crown. In the summer of 1153, the journey came to its end. Pope Eugene III, once a humble monk, now worn by years of labor and exile, lay ill in Tivoli, not far from the Eternal City. He had carried the burdens of the church through storms of revolt and failure, never clinging to the title of pope, only to the call of Christ. There was no grand farewell, no trumpet, no triumph, just the quiet end of a faithful servant. He died as he had lived, in humility, in prayer, in peace. But heaven remembers what the world forgets. Though he wore the papal crown, his true crown was unseen. Not gold, but grace. Not woven by men, but by the hand of God. For Eugene had fulfilled the words of the Lord. The greatest among you must be your servant. Years passed. His name faded from memory. Few spoke of the reluctant pope, the quiet shepherd. But the church never forgets its faithful. In 1874, centuries after his death, Pope Pius IX declared Eugene III blessed. not for his power, but for his virtue, not for his conquests, but for his faith. In the hidden recesses of church history, his light now shines. He is a sign for every soul who feels too small, too quiet, too weak to be used by God. Eugene III reminds us that sanctity is not measured by noise or fame, but by obedience, love, and endurance. His miracles? They were not dramatic healings or thunder from the sky. His miracles were the thousands of souls he quietly protected, the church he patiently guided, and the witness he left behind, that even the most reluctant among us can become a vessel of glory. He was the monk who became a pope, the exile who became a father, the hidden one who now stands among the blessed. Blessed Eugene III, pray for us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Blessed Eugene III. In a world full of noise, he chose silence. In a time of conflict, he chose peace. May his example inspire us to walk humbly, serve faithfully, and trust in God's call, no matter how hidden the path. If this story touched your heart, share it with others. And remember, the greatest saints often begin as the quietest souls. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may you walk, like Eugene, with courage and grace.